The gravel crunching under my tires felt like a warning I was choosing to ignore. Walking into my parents' backyard that afternoon, I could already feel the familiar tightening in my chest, a physical reaction to 29 years of conditioning. I kept repeating the mantra my therapist gave me. Be a gray rock. Be boring. Don't react. I was a grown woman, a graphic designer, and a mother to a bright, energetic 8-year-old named Lily. My only job today was to survive 3 hours of a family barbecue without letting them draw blood. But my sister, Vanessa, was already holding court by the water, looking like she had stepped out of a magazine spread, scanning us for weaknesses. I tightened my grip on Lily's hand. She was still wearing her dance recital outfit, a scuffed pink hoodie and jeans, because she was just a child excited for a burger, not a prop for a social event. But in this house, everything was a performance. I saw Vanessa's eyes lock onto Lily, and then onto the shimmering blue water of the pool. The air felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that usually preceded a storm. Suddenly, a splash shattered the conversation. I turned. Lily was in the water. She hadn't fallen. The angle was wrong. She had been pushed. She was fully clothed, heavy with denim and shock, sinking fast. Panic didn't just hit me. It possessed me. I didn't scream. I lunged. I was a mother saving her child. But before I could take 2 steps, a steel grip clamped onto the back of my neck. It was my dad, Richard. He yanked me backward with a violence that snapped my head back, his fingers digging into my windpipe. "Stop," he roared. Not at the water, but at me. "Let her learn. If she can't swim, she doesn't deserve to be here." I was trapped in his grip, clawing at his forearm, watching my daughter struggle against the weight of her clothes, her eyes wide with terror under the surface. That moment stretched into an eternity. The smell of burning charcoal mixed with the metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth. My mother, Eleanor, stood 10 feet away, swirling the ice in her Chardonnay, watching the scene with the detached curiosity of someone watching a nature documentary. She didn't drop her glass. She didn't shout. She just watched. "Richard, let me go!" I choked out, my voice sounding ragged and small. "You've coddled her just like you coddled yourself, Morgan," my father hissed, his breath hot against my ear. "Sink or swim. That's the rule of this house." He was treating my daughter's potential drowning as a teachable moment, a twisted lesson in Darwinism. Lily wasn't coming up. The heavy denim of her jeans was dragging her down into the deep end, which dropped sharply to 8 feet. I could see her black hair fanning out like spilled ink in the turquoise water. She was thrashing, but her movements were slowing down. She was 7 years old, tired from dance practice, and confused why her family was watching her die. Something in my brain snapped. It wasn't a thought. It was a biological override. I stopped pulling away from my father and instead slammed my heel backward with every ounce of strength I possessed, driving it directly into his shin. The bone-on-bone impact made a sickening crack. Richard howled and his grip loosened for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. I tore myself free, leaving scratches on my own neck from his fingernails, and threw myself into the water. The silence underwater was instant and jarring. I kept my eyes open, the chlorine stinging, searching for the pink blur of her hoodie. I found her near the bottom. She had stopped kicking. I grabbed the front of her sweatshirt, wrapped my legs around her waist, and kicked off the concrete floor of the pool with a force that sent a shockwave through my spine. We broke the surface, gasping. I hauled her onto the pool deck, her small body heaving, water pouring from her mouth. She was coughing, a terrible, retching sound that was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I collapsed beside her, shivering not from cold but from rage. "God, you're dramatic," Vanessa's voice drifted down from above. She was standing over us, her white silk romper perfectly dry, not a hair out of place. She looked at Lily, who was vomiting pool water onto the expensive slate tiles, and wrinkled her nose. "Look at the mess. You really need to teach her some coordination, Morgan." She fell in like a sack of potatoes. "She didn't fall," I rasped, wiping wet hair from my eyes. I looked up at them. My mother was checking her watch. My father was rubbing his shin, his face purple with indignation rather than concern. "She slipped, Morgan," my mother said, her voice bored. "Don't make a scene. You're embarrassing us in front of the neighbors." "I saw you," I whispered, looking directly at Vanessa. "I saw your hand on her back." Vanessa smirked, a small, cruel curving of her lips that I knew better than my own reflection. Prove it. It's just us here, and we all know you have a history of exaggerating. My father stepped forward, limping slightly. He loomed over me, blocking out the sun. Get the kid dry and get inside. You've ruined the mood. And Morgan, if you ever touch me like that again, you won't be walking out of here. I looked at Lily. She was trembling, her lips turning blue, clinging to my wet shirt like a lifeline. She wasn't crying anymore. She was in shock. I looked at the three people standing around us, the patriarch, the matriarch, and the golden child. They weren't a family. They were a pack of wolves who had just decided the cub wasn't worth the meat. In that shivering, wet silence, the fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It felt like a steel door slamming shut in the back of my mind. I realized I had been playing their game by their rules for 29 years. I had been trying to win their love, or at least their approval. But you can't win a game that is rigged against you. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I stood up, lifting Lily into my arms. She was heavy, soaking wet, but I didn't feel the weight. I won't be walking out of here again. Good, he grunted, turning back to the grill. Go fix yourself up. I didn't go inside to dry off. I walked straight to the patio table where my purse was sitting. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unzip it, but I managed to pull out my phone. I didn't look at them. I didn't ask for permission. I dialed 3 numbers. 911. What is your emergency? The silence in the backyard was absolute. The clinking of ice in my mother's glass stopped. Vanessa's smirk faltered. My father froze with the spatula in midair. I need an ambulance and police at 42 Oakwood Drive, I said into the phone, my voice loud and clear in the heavy afternoon air. My child has nearly drowned. She was assaulted, and I am being threatened. Morgan, put that phone down, my mother hissed, her eyes darting to the fence line where the neighbors might hear. Don't you dare. I turned my back on them, clutching Lily to my chest, and walked toward the driveway. She is conscious but breathing shallowly, I told the operator. I am waiting in the front yard. Please hurry. I didn't look back. I could hear my father shouting, the heavy thud of his footsteps starting after me, but I was already through the side gate. I sat on the curb of the street, the rough concrete biting into my legs, rocking my daughter as the distant wail of sirens began to cut through the suburban quiet. For the first time in my life, that sound didn't signal danger. It signaled the cavalry. The wail of the siren wasn't just noise. It was a wall being built between me and them. I sat on the curb, the rough concrete biting into my legs, holding Lily so tight I could feel the frantic rhythm of her heart against my chest. I had kept the line open with the 911 dispatcher, her calm voice a tether to a reality where parents didn't watch their grandchildren drown for sport. When the ambulance turned the corner, painting the manicured lawns of Oakwood Drive in chaotic strokes of red and blue, my father stopped shouting. He and my mother stood on the porch, frozen. They were people who cared about appearances above all else, and nothing ruins a suburban reputation quite like a squad car parking on the grass. The paramedics didn't ask for my father's permission to enter. They didn't care about his status in the Rotary Club or his expensive grill. They moved with a military precision that made me want to weep with relief. 2 of them, a man and a woman, immediately swarmed Lily. They were gentle but efficient, their hands moving with a practiced speed that cut through the emotional fog. She swallowed water, I stammered, my voice trembling as the adrenaline began to crash. She was under for maybe 30 seconds. She vomited, but she's shivering. We've got her, ma'am, the female medic said, wrapping a thermal blanket around Lily's shaking shoulders. You're doing great. Stay with us. They loaded us into the back of the ambulance. As the doors slammed shut, sealing us inside that sterile, bright box, I saw my father trying to approach the police officer who had just arrived. He had his reasonable man face on, the one he used to charm waitresses and intimidate contractors. But the officer wasn't smiling. He held up a hand, palm out, stopping Richard in his tracks. That single gesture, a stranger telling my father no, felt like the earth shifting on its axis. The ride to the hospital was a blur of medical jargon and beeping monitors. I sat on the bench seat, holding Lily's cold hand, watching her oxygen saturation numbers climb slowly. Every beep of the heart monitor was a reminder of how close we had come to silence. At the emergency room, the atmosphere shifted from urgent to clinical. The doctors and nurses here had seen it all. They knew the difference between a clumsy accident and negligence. The attending physician, a woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, listened to my lungs and then Lily's. She asked about the water in the pool, the temperature, and the depth. Then she looked at the bruising, blooming on my skin. "Who did this?" she asked, pointing to the finger marks on my neck. I touched the tender skin. In the mirror of the exam room, the bruises looked like a dark necklace, a physical manifestation of my father's control. "My father," I said. The truth felt heavy, like a stone I was finally setting down. He held me back. He wouldn't let me get to her. The doctor didn't gasp. She didn't look away. She simply nodded and made a note on her chart. "We are mandatory reporters," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, confidential tone. "I'm triggering a protocol. A social worker and an officer will be here shortly to take a formal statement." It was the first time in my life that an authority figure hadn't dismissed me as emotional or dramatic. Here, in this room of stainless steel and antiseptic, facts were the only currency that mattered. An hour later, a police officer entered. He was older, with a kind face but eyes that didn't miss a thing. He pulled up a chair and took out a notepad. "Tell me exactly what happened, Morgan. Start from the beginning," I told him. I didn't embellish. I didn't cry. I spoke with the clipped, dry precision of a soldier reporting from the front lines. I told him about Vanessa's smirk. I told him about the push. I told him about the daughter I almost lost because she wasn't perfect enough for them. When I got to the part about my dad pinning me down, the officer stopped writing. He looked up, his pen hovering over the paper. "He physically restrained you from entering the water?" "Yes," I said. He grabbed me by the throat. He said, "If she can't survive water, she doesn't deserve life." He called it a lesson. The officer wrote that down verbatim. He asked me to repeat it to ensure he had the exact phrasing. "That's a direct quote?" "Okay." He closed the notebook with a snap that sounded like a gavel coming down. "We're going to need to photograph your injuries, and we're going to need to speak to any witnesses." "My cousins were there," I said. "They saw it. They were too scared to move, but they saw it." As the officer left to coordinate with the units still at the house, a woman in a soft gray cardigan walked in. She introduced herself as Mrs. Gable from CPS. She didn't look like the scary government agents my parents had always warned me about, the ones who steal children in the night. She looked like a librarian, calm and steady. "Morgan," she said, sitting down at eye level with me. "I've spoken to the doctor and the officer. Based on the severity of the incident and the immediate threat to the child's life, we are opening an investigation immediately." She explained the process. It wasn't about tearing a family apart. It was about building a wall around the vulnerable. She used words like protective custody and safety plan. "I have evidence," I blurted out. "Not just today, years of texts, voicemails. I have a recording of my mother laughing after it happened." Mrs. Gable's eyes widened slightly. "You have a recording?" "I didn't hang up the phone immediately after calling emergency services," I explained. "It recorded the background audio for another minute. It caught my sister mocking us." "That is excellent," Mrs. Gable said, her voice firm. "We will need all of that. But right now, we need to secure your immediate safety. You cannot go back to that house." "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "I have an apartment," I said. "But they have a key." "Not anymore," she said. "We can issue a temporary emergency order. If they come near you or Lily, they will be arrested. We can file a police report for the assault on you and the endangerment of the child right now." I looked at Lily, who was finally sleeping on the hospital bed, a small, fragile shape under the white sheets. She looked peaceful, unaware that the world outside this room was shifting tectonically. "Do it," I said. "File everything. I want it all on paper." Mrs. Gable nodded and began filling out a form. The scratching of her pen was the sound of a fortress being built, brick by brick. For 29 years, my family had relied on silence to maintain their power. They thrived in the shadows of family business and private matters. But here, under the fluorescent lights of the hospital, there were no shadows. There was only the blinding, antiseptic light of the truth. And for the first time, the system wasn't working to protect their reputation. It was working to protect us. The morning after the incident, the silence in my small apartment was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the rustle of paperwork. "Mrs. Gable," The social worker assigned to our case sat at my kitchen table, her laptop open, typing with a steady rhythm that felt like armor being forged. "We have the emergency safety plan in place," she said, her voice calm and professional. "But to make it stick, we need to be thorough. The temporary order is good for 72 hours. To extend it, we need a pattern of behavior." I unlocked my phone and placed it on the table. For years, I had been hoarding screenshots like a squirrel preparing for a nuclear winter. Cruel texts from my mother about my weight, voicemails from my dad threatening to cut me off if I didn't attend his events, and the pièce de résistance, a video from Christmas 2 years ago where Vanessa accidentally tripped Lily into a snowbank and laughed while she cried. "This is admissible," Mrs. Gable said, scrolling through the timeline. "It establishes a history of emotional abuse and physical neglect. It proves the pool incident wasn't an anomaly, it was an escalation." We spent the next 3 hours building a digital fortress. Every insult, every threat, every gaslighting attempt was cataloged, dated, and uploaded to a secure server. It felt clinical, almost boring, but that was the point. Abuse thrives on emotion. Justice thrives on documentation. By noon, I had a file number and a caseworker who wasn't afraid of my father's golf buddies. But the legal battle was only one front. My parents' power wasn't just physical, it was social. They ruled their little suburban kingdom through gossip and exclusion. To truly protect us, I had to dismantle their influence. I started with the school. I walked into the principal's office with a copy of the police report and the temporary custody order. The secretary, a woman who usually greeted me with a polite nod, looked at the bruising on my neck and then at the official seal on the paper. Her expression shifted from polite to fierce. "We will implement a code red for Lily immediately," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Her file is flagged. No one picks her up but you. If anyone else tries, the police are called automatically. We have a resource officer on campus who will be notified." Next was the church. My parents were pillars of the community, the kind of people who donated stained glass windows to ensure their names were literally written in light. I met with Pastor Miller in his office. He was a kind man who had baptized me, but he was also a man who disliked conflict. "Morgan," he said gently, "families fight. Perhaps some counseling." "This wasn't a fight, Pastor," I interrupted, placing a copy of the medical report on his desk. "This was attempted drowning, and my father stopped me from saving her." He read the report. His face paled. He looked up at me, and I saw the denial crumbling. He stopped you?" "Yes." "And he called it a lesson." Pastor Miller closed the folder. He didn't offer a prayer. He offered policy. "We have strict guidelines regarding child safety. Anyone under investigation for this cannot hold a leadership position in youth ministry, or any ministry involving vulnerable populations." "I'm not asking for a sermon," I said. "I'm asking you to enforce your own rules." By Sunday, my father's name had quietly disappeared from the bulletin. He was no longer listed as a deacon. No announcement was made, no public shaming, just a silent, administrative erasure. Then came the hardest part, the social circle. My parents' friends were the jury of their peers. I didn't need to win them over. I just needed to neutralize them. I called Mrs. Higgins, my mother's best friend and the queen bee of the garden club. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm calling to let you know that Lily won't be attending the charity gala next week. There was an incident at the house. Police and CPS are involved. For everyone's safety, we are stepping back." I didn't give details. I didn't badmouth them. I just dropped the words police and safety like stones into a pond and let the ripples do the work. In their world, a police investigation was a social leprosy. The phone calls stopped. The invitations dried up. My parents, who thrived on being the center of attention, were suddenly radioactive. They didn't know why their friends were busy, or why the church elders were unavailable. They were experiencing the one thing they had always inflicted on me: isolation. But this time, the isolation wasn't a punishment. It was a quarantine. I spent the evenings with Lily, reading stories about brave girls who outsmarted dragons. We didn't talk about the pool. We talked about the future. I enrolled her in a swim class at the YMCA, one with certified instructors who taught water safety through empowerment, not fear. I watched from the observation deck as she dipped her toe in the water, terrified, but then she looked up at me, and I nodded. She took a breath and got in. She was reclaiming the water. I was reclaiming our lives. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the end of the week. My lawyer, a shark in a pinstripe suit named Mr. Vance, told me to expect a fight. They will try to charm the judge, he warned. They will bring character witnesses. They will say you are unstable. Let them try, I said. I have the truth. And for the first time, I have the receipts. We walked into the courthouse not as victims, but as architects of our own defense. The system, often slow and clumsy, was finally moving with the inexorable weight of a glacier. It was cold, it was hard, and it was crushing everything in its path. A week later, the bruises on my neck had faded to a sickly yellow, but the resolve in my chest had hardened into steel. I returned to my parents' house for one reason only: to collect the rest of Lily's belongings. This time, I didn't park down the street. I pulled into the driveway right behind a police cruiser. I wasn't alone. Mrs. Gable walked beside me, her clipboard like a shield, and Officer Miller, the same man who had taken my initial statement, stood by the door. His presence was a silent, undeniable statement. The law was here, and it was on my side. My dad opened the door, his face a mask of confusion that quickly curdled into anger when he saw the uniform. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, like a balloon that had been slowly leaking air all week. The silence from his friends, the polite refusals from the church, the whispers at the grocery store, it had all taken a toll. His kingdom was crumbling, and he didn't even know which brick had been pulled first. "What is this, Morgan?" he demanded, trying to summon his old bluster. "You're bringing the police to my house? Over a little misunderstanding?" "We're here to retrieve the child's personal items," Officer Miller said, his voice flat and professional. "This is not a negotiation, sir. Step aside." My mother appeared behind him, her face pinched and pale. She tried to start ranting immediately. "Oh, please, Morgan, you're dragging this out. You love drama more than air. You're just like your aunt, hysterical." "Ma'am," the officer cut her off, his hand resting casually on his belt. "We have a court order. Do not interfere." Vanessa tried to walk toward Lily's room like she still owned every part of my life, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a metronome of entitlement. Mrs. Gable stopped her with just one finger raised. "You are not permitted to be involved in this process. Return to the living room." Vanessa actually froze. For the first time in her life, someone had told her no and meant it. She looked at my mother, then at my father, but they were powerless. The spell was broken. I went upstairs and packed Lily's favorite dolls, her sketchbook, her pajamas, her little hair ties, her backpack, everything that smelled like her, everything that was hers. I moved with efficiency, not emotion. I didn't cry over the memories in this house. I packed them away like I was closing a museum exhibit. When I came downstairs, my parents were standing in the foyer like children who finally realized no adult was coming to protect them this time. I looked at my dad directly in the face for the first time in my life without fear. The man who had choked me, who had watched my daughter drown to teach a lesson, was just a sad, angry old man in a polo shirt. "You will never have access to my child again," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Not supervised, not public, not holidays, not at school, not ever." He laughed a pathetic half-laugh, but it died halfway out because right then, at that exact moment, Officer Miller handed him a sheaf of papers. "This is an emergency no-contact order, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," the officer said. "It was approved by a judge this morning. You are not allowed within 500 yards of Morgan or Lily. That includes their home, their school, and their places of employment. Any violation will result in immediate arrest." My father stared at the papers. 500 yards? That's ridiculous. We're her grandparents." "Not anymore," I said. "You're a threat, and the law agrees." He didn't even get a warning. He didn't get a chance to argue. It was already filed, already active, already real. That was my revenge. Not a speech, not a dramatic show. I demolished the only weapon they ever had over me: access. I walked out the front door, the heavy oak slamming shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. Lily was waiting in the car, safe, watching a video on my phone. I got in, buckled my seatbelt, and looked at the house one last time. It looked small in the rearview mirror. As I drove away, I realized something profound. They didn't lose a fight. They lost us forever. And in the quiet of the car, with my daughter humming a tune in the back seat, I felt lighter than air. The closure wasn't something they gave me, it was something I took. And as that front door shut behind me, they finally understood. The toxic cycle ended with me. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.